What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Blazers Uprise Live here on a Monday. We got a couple things to talk about today. First off, it's 1 day away from Media Day. I'm not going to start rhyming that again. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. 1 week away. Not 1 day away. See, 1 week away. Not 1 day. I wish it was 1 day, man. I'm ready for the season to start. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Blazers Uprise Live. These will be at 3:30 p.m. a month from now as the season tips off on October 19th. We are 1 month away from the regular season tipping off. We are 1 week away from Media Day, so we're rolling into things, Eric. I'm excited, man. Before we jump into things, I just want to plug the main channel, because this channel's been getting, honestly, better viewership than the main channel, so I feel like some of you probably are finding this and don't know we have a main channel where I'm dropping player previews right now. I just dropped the first one on Greg Brown III, so definitely go check that out. If you don't know what the main channel is, just search Blazers Uprise. Just search it without the live. It's Blazers Uprise, that's the main channel. Blazers Uprise Live is where we stream twice a week. This is our second channel. And then dropped a podcast earlier today on this channel, Believe in Blazers podcast. Dropped it about an hour ago. So if you want to watch that after this, go check it out so that you can get your fix of Blazers content, as we are 1 week away from Media Day. Eric, what's going on, man?
Not much. And another plug, I guess. I filmed my first video for a series I'm going to be starting on NBA Uprise, kind of a general, wanted to have more, coverage other than just the Blazers and expand our knowledge about other teams as well. So I'm going to be starting a series on that channel, and so look for the first video of that to be out soon.
Yeah, we're trying to do more, and I did a whole top 100 player series on that main channel, but anything that's NBA related that I put on the Blazers channel doesn't do as well as anything Blazer related, which makes sense. It's a Blazers channel, so that's no surprise, but definitely want to get that NBA channel up off the ground. So NBA Uprise, just go to YouTube and Google that. I need to get all the links together for this channel and put them in the description. I just forget to set the default description for these streams, but yeah, looking forward to working with Eric on getting some content out for the NBA channel. Right, we're doing more this season. We're doing more, so I'm excited to get things rolling. I think that's everything to plug, man. How was your day? How was the start of your week? You have a good day?
Yeah, it was pretty uneventful.
Yeah, I slept it on accident, so it was a productive day otherwise. But yeah. I set my Sunday alarm that only goes off on Sundays, and it's Monday, so it was bad. It was a mistake, but got out the video, got out the podcast, and now just chilling with you guys. We do have some things to talk about. I talked about this on the podcast, so I will let you talk about this. I want to get your thoughts on this, Eric. Gary Payton II had surgery in July on a core muscle. It's always the core muscles with the Portland Trailblazers, I guess. That's
That's becoming the new thing, yeah.
Which I'll take that over it being knees.
Right.
I'll take it.
Especially,
right? If it's got to be something.
We haven't seen the final product yet for anyone, because we've had 3 players now, Dame, Nas, and Gary Payton, that have all had it. We haven't seen any of them play in an actual game since they've had the surgery, so I guess we should probably wait to reserve judgment to make sure it worked and cure that, and they don't have problems that arise because of it before we get too far ahead of us. But yeah, seemingly in theory, it should be a lot better.
Hopefully we didn't hire Zach Collins' preferred doctor, which was probably no longer preferred, right? So hopefully it was a good doctor, man, because there's a lot riding on that.
Speaking of that, did you see that that's who Chet decided to go with?
The same. Zach Collins' doctor?
Yeah.
Is there a Gonzaga tie there or something?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I was a little worried about it, so hopefully.
Yeah, that's not good. Not a good decision, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully he learned from his mistakes, because he did a bad job on Zach Collins. That's a whole nother thing. But so GP2 had surgery, Eric, and there was a press release a couple days ago, right? It's September 19th. He had surgery in July. Nobody knew about it until the middle of September. And the team finally announced it supposedly 2 months after it happened, which is just weird. What are your thoughts on that?
I wish we could ask why they didn't just announce it. I mean, to me, they've talked about being transparent and not hiding this stuff anymore, and now here they are doing it again. Like, what would be the purpose of that other than to maybe protect your signing or like try to, make sure the organization doesn't get a bunch of like, why did we sign him if he needed surgery type comments, And it's just, once again, it's not anything that is concerning by itself, but these things keep adding up on things where they just don't seemingly do the right thing. And I hate to think this because they've done nothing wrong, but it's starting to remind me of a lot of college programs that cover up things for several years and never just do the right thing and just, take the hit. And by coming out and saying everything, they try to hide it and cover up stuff. And eventually it comes out, and it's so much worse when it comes out 2 months later than when you would have just came out with it in July. And so I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. Like I said, it's just kind of frustrating that it's seemingly just another thing that the Blazers, why were they keeping it a secret? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, it really makes no sense to me, man. But Blazers are gonna Blazers. It seems
Right.
like they're on this streak where they're like trying to figure out. I mean, I think I said this last stream. They're on this streak where they're trying to figure out the weirdest, most random ways to annoy the fan base or make the fan base question them.
Yeah.
And this is just another one. Oh yeah, guess what? The guy we signed back in July 2 months ago. Yeah, he had surgery back in July 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. Thanks for letting us know now, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just weird, strange, man. Like, hopefully he's ready to go, I guess, but it's that's the thing is, like, with him, he's a guy who physically needs to be at his peak to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not just going to go out there at like 70% but still be able to shoot threes and space the floor. And then it's not like he has the size where it's like, even if he's not physically at his peak, he can, still protect the rim or whatever. And you know what I mean? Like, if Miles Turner isn't at his peak, he can still be mostly what Miles Turner is, and he's a 3-and-D shot blocking rim protector. But Gary Payton II is like the type of player who gets it done by playing harder than everybody else, that gets it done like playing defense against guys that are bigger than him, and just like athletically he's an extremely athletic player and utilizes that athleticism a lot on offense, off cuts, running in transition, that sort of thing. Like, he is the one guy on this team that needs to be at his physical peak the most in order to be an effective player. So I'm not worried necessarily about this, but if there was ever a guy to worry about this with, it would be him.
Yeah. I look at it more, I'm just disappointed now. It seems like when they say he'll be ready for the start of the regular season, that means he will not be involved at all in training camp. So we don't get to have him learn Chauncey's system fully. We don't get to see him actually play in preseason games with his teammates. And I think this pretty much clinches that he will come off the bench. I don't think he could win the starting small forward spot without playing in training camp. So I think that's going to come down to Nas and Hart. I still think Nas has the advantage there, but I think that rules out Gary Payton becoming the starting small forward. And this might make it so, I mean, in a perfect world, maybe this allows Sharp to get more minutes and he just takes it and runs with it and does well with those minutes. And maybe Gary Payton, it kind of sucks if it happens due to injury, but maybe it's kind of to the point where we don't really need him to play that much, especially if Sharp's playing well. You wouldn't want to cut his minutes. So it's unfortunate timing, but it does leave an opportunity for some of the other guys, maybe even a Keon Johnson, to step in and get some minutes that he wouldn't have otherwise gotten.
Yeah, even if Shaedon Sharpe plays phenomenal, I don't see him stealing Gary Payton II's minutes. I just see the Blazers going even smaller, if that's the case. Which is another conversation. It gets into like rotation and who's playing where and, who's the backup 4, who's the starting 3, yada, yada, yada. But that was my point, about a month ago when we started to discuss this stuff with it's easier to find minutes at perimeter spots for Shaedon Sharpe if he earns minutes if you play Nas at the backup 4. But if you start him at the 3, that's taking away minutes from the 3 instead of taking away minutes from the 4. So that is... I would love for Shaedon Sharpe to come into preseason and look phenomenal, and then we can truly have this conversation where it's like, all right, how do you divvy up the minutes? I just think, like, the Blazers they were desperate for a defensive on-ball stopper, and they went out and signed one for $9 million a year. Like, he is such a needed piece on this team in terms of his defense that, like, even if Shaedon Sharpe plays phenomenal, I still don't know how you can't play Gary Payton the second 20 minutes because the whole issue is just the defense. And it's like, that's your piece to kind of get you back up to average, hopefully. So it would be an interesting situation if Shaedon Sharpe plays really well and Gary Payton II isn't playing much due to injury. It would be interesting to see, like, if he's not playing much due to injury in preseason, or if he misses the preseason to, like, finish up his recovery, because I don't think he's going to miss the regular season, but, like, if they're cautious with him and he doesn't play in the preseason and Shaedon Sharpe looks phenomenal, and a month from now, we're going into opening night and we haven't seen Gary Payton II in a Blazer uniform since he was a part of our training camp roster 3 years ago, then it will be a really interesting thing to see Chauncey Billups handle, because I don't think you can sit there and not play Gary Payton II unless, like, Shaedon Sharpe looks really good defensively. And even if Shaedon Sharpe plays great, I just don't see how he's going to be a positive defensive player year one, given that he hasn't even played in college. So it sets up a really interesting dynamic. Obviously, it's easier if Shaedon Sharpe struggles, but we don't want that. So that's just one of the storylines heading into preseason and then into the regular season if Sharpe plays well.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about this scenario? What if Payton is limited minute-wise, like they put him on a minutes restriction, let's say it's like 10 minutes a game, and the Blazers are, let's say, 15th in defense after the first 10 games of the season or something, with him playing very limited or not at all. Do you think that might change their mind on how needed he is and possibly make it so they don't have to play him as much? Or what do you think would happen in that scenario?
Well,
I know, kind of unlikely, but...
No, I know, but I'm laughing because, first off, if that scenario happens, it justifies all our questions about what is this signing when we made it. Because if you guys remember, chat, when Gary Payton II got signed, we'd already been live for like 8 hours with our free agency stream, and people were saying, you should sign off, and just, like, take the rest of the day off, because I was burnt out. But I was like, watch, if we sign off, there's going to be a signing right after it. And of course there was. That was Gary Payton II. So then I went live again, and I was already just mentally exhausted. But I went live and was like, what? Kind of, I wouldn't say ranted about the signing. I was just confused. It's like you just drafted a guard. You have Josh Hart, Dame, and Ant as your 3-guard lineup. You got Shaedon Sharpe, who can play some 3. You got Nas that can play some 3. You drafted Shaedon Sharpe at 7. Like, if you plan on playing him year one, that should be your 5-man rotation at the point guard, shooting guard, and small forward spots. But then you throw in, I wanted a defensive forward that could play some 4 and, like, a bigger defender, and then we go out and sign a 6'2" guard in Gary Payton II after Cronin said that he envisioned balancing the roster more in terms of height. So when the signing happened, it was like, what does this mean? Like, you went against your word in terms of balancing the roster. We already have enough perimeter players. We have Keon Johnson too to throw him out there. So it really confused me. If that scenario happens, Eric, where the defense is like average with Gary Payton barely playing, and maybe they elect, oh, well, we're not going to play him much after that, then it just justifies that whole stream, right? Like, all the questions we asked, like, that makes the signing look bad, as Chris Brandlin says. But I think in that scenario, it come down to, where is the defense having success and where is it failing? If there's like a situation where I could see us being average defensively, but still needing a guy like a Gary Payton II, right? Maybe our rim protection's good and our team defense good, but we struggle against, some of the best guards in the league because we don't have that guy that can lock them down, right? So I don't know. It's all context based. It's kind of hard to say, but if he doesn't play much, if he's on a minutes restriction and we have a decent defense, I think it will be context dependent upon how much we need him, based upon where we're seeing success and where we're struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And I hope he's a big part of the team moving forward with how much we paid for him and getting Hart capped and all that kind of stuff, because that was the other thing you didn't mention was part of the reason with our frustrations was getting hard capped and that kind of eliminating us from being able to do many other trades all summer long. And yeah, the other part of it is, what did we hear that whole stream? Don't worry, they're not done making moves. We haven't signed Nurk yet, right? Like there's something big still coming. Don't worry, guys, right? And we had to listen to that. And where was that big move? When was that happening? Is it still gonna happen, guys? I don't.
Yeah. It's just, now I'm cool with it. It's just everything leading up made that signing almost shocking. But then at the same time, it wasn't shocking at all because you were reporting like they were interested in Matisse Thybulle. Mm-hmm. They were interested in Bruce Brown was another guy that they looked at in free agency. Like that was the archetype of player that we had been hearing whispers about them being interested in after he said he was going to balance the roster. So it would just be funny if in the end it was like, well, first off, we said we were going to balance the roster, but then we went out and drafted Shaedon Sharpe, and then we signed a 6'2 guard, but then Shaedon Sharpe played so well and our defense was good enough we didn't need the 6'2 guard we signed because we have so many guards. It would be very funny if that was chronologically, like, looking from the trade deadline last year to that scenario. If that took place, it would honestly be hilarious.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's in a good way.
And Bailey Smith jokes, yes, it's going to happen. The big move was waiving Bledsoe and Ingles. I know it's a joke, so you're being sarcastic. But Ingles had already signed, so we'd already lost him at the time we signed Gary Payton. And the Gary Payton signing, as we told you on that stream, meant we had to waive Bledsoe. So that wasn't like a decision or anything. We could not keep Bledsoe, and we could not trade his full contract for to use as salary filler either after we signed Gary Payton. So that kind of restricted us from doing anything with that contract. And that was the disappointing part to me is, not a lot of big trades happened for players that we would have been interested in, I guess. But just not having that contract or the ability to maybe keep that contract until the deadline by getting hard cap, that was the frustrating part for me. Because now if you talk about any kind of player making around $20 million, it's tough for the Blazers to match that salary rise without giving up a core piece.
Yeah, and as far as Bledsoe, when we got him, people were saying, oh, well, his expiring contract is going to be valuable. And people treated it as if his expiring contract had value. What do I always say about expiring contracts, Eric?
I don't know. What do you say?
That they don't have value in themselves. They just help facilitate a deal, right?
Yeah.
What's crazy is, I've said that a lot recently, and I said that about Bledsoe's contract. His expiring contract doesn't just have value in itself. It can help facilitate a deal where a team, maybe wants an expiring contract instead of long-term salary or something, right? Expiring contracts help make a deal happen where the other assets have some value, and that's what teams want. What's funny is I watched back a video from right when I started this channel back in 2019, and I almost said that verbatim. I didn't realize I've been saying that for so long, but there was a whole video about Evan Turner, getting traded, and he was on the last year of his contract, and in that video, I was talking about how we'd still have to attach assets to dump him unless, it was for another bad contract, which it ended up being for Kent Bazemore. And I said that in that stream, man. I was laughing at it. I said something right along the lines of, an expiring contract doesn't have value in itself. So I've been preaching that for 3 years. But then when we get Eric Bledsoe and his expiring contract at the trade deadline, there was a lot of people treating it as if his expiring contract had value. It was an asset in itself. No, it's just a facilitary piece. There's a difference between valuable assets and facilitary pieces, or facilitary things.
In the old CBA, it would have had value having when you could have traded the full contract, but the team could have still waived him and not had to guarantee it. But yeah, ever since they changed that rule, it definitely takes away the advantage of having those type of contracts. And I think it was mostly people who didn't understand that were propping it up.
Yeah. Which J.R. Smith was the last contract under that loophole.
Mm-hmm.
And we explained that at the time, like, this J.R. Smith contract's the last contract under this loophole, because that took, like, the final time you could use that loophole, because I think contracts signed under that loophole, you could still use that loophole, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think the last contract expired in 2020, and I remember us talking about it at that time, so... Yeah. You know, we try to educate you guys, and that's why Eric had his CBA video he dropped on the main channel a couple days ago as well, talking about the hard cap and that sort of things. We try and make it so you guys know what's going on with this team and the team building stuff. So, yeah, it's I don't know how we got on this topic, but it's just interesting to look back at things.
Yeah, I think ultimately with Gary Payton, like, we'll look back and it's not a big deal. I think for a player like him, I don't think it's really that important that he gets a ton of practice time. I think he's kind of a plug-and-play player no matter what the system is. Just would have been nice for him to get on the same page with some of the players, but I think it'll be fine as long as he is ready to go by the regular season like they say he should be.
Yep, absolutely. So, let's jump into the next segment. Let's do over-under win totals. All right, so since this is a perfect segue, I was talking about, like, looking back to when we started the channel. The first episode of Blazers Uprise Live was initially called the Blazers Uprise Podcast, and we used to only have one channel. We used to just upload, when we started it, we just uploaded podcast videos, and then we made it go live. But it's crazy. We used to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday when we started it, which was a little too much. And then we switched it to Monday and Thursday, which is what it is now. But it used to be the Blazers Uprise Podcast that we do on the main channel. And then when the pandemic hit, I made the second channel because I wanted to stream random stuff because I had nothing to do. And this is that second channel. And now it's morphed into, I'm not streaming random stuff on here. It's like a whole nother entity that, you know, we take seriously. But on the first podcast, me and you did in person, Eric, the first episode of Blazers Uprise Live / the Blazers Uprise Podcast, we did in person, and we talked over-under win totals in that podcast, where we took 3 teams we were confident in picking the over for, and 3 teams we were confident in picking the under for, and we talked about those teams. And I figured it'd be fun to do that again. I think that first episode was like, like sometime this time in September. So it's like a 3-year anniversary of Blazers Uprise Live starting, essentially.
Nice.
Yeah, so figured it'd be fun to do. All right, now, we're not going to talk about every team.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have a whole standings prediction stream for that. So I don't want to talk about every team on here. Go ahead.
In general, did you find a lot of the win totals seem low?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Somewhat. There were some teams where I thought they were a little high.
Yeah.
But yeah, we also, the Blazers, we both would take the over for. Didn't want to throw them in there because... You know, we'd both take the over on that. Their win total was like 40.5.
If you want some easy money, definitely put something down on the Blazers this year.
Yeah. I mean, shouldn't say easy money after last year. Eric, that's your favorite phrase, easy money, jinx. Let me knock on wood.
It's different.
But it's different this year? Is that phrase like the opposite of jinxing this year? It guarantees things?
Yeah.
Okay, well, is your fantasy football team easy money right now, Eric?
My fantasy football team is easy money right now.
Yeah, Eric's 2-0 as the high score both weeks, so that's yeah. If he's willing to put that on his fantasy football team, then I believe it's not a jinx. All right, so we're rolling with the easy money quote this year. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a ridiculous line, but I'm gonna throw up a image. Here it is. An image with all the over-under totals. We got this from Vegas Insider. All right, so these were all the over-under win totals that we had to pick from. Obviously, the highest is on the left. I was a little surprised seeing Boston is the number 1 team there, but we're not going to talk about all of these. Instead, we're each going to give 3 overs. We might have the same ones. I don't know Eric's over.
I don't know yours either.
Yeah, so we might have the same ones. It'll be interesting to see if we have the same ones. But you guys can also, you know, debate amongst yourselves on these over-under win total numbers in chat if you want to. But just this is the first time I've looked at the entire league, really, so I found it interesting to look at. So we're going to start with the overs, all right? And I'm going to let you go first on this one, Eric. Who is your first over?
Do you want to start with like the biggest win total or the lowest win total?
Start with the one you're most confident in.
All right. My number one choice, this might be a little surprising, but it is the Orlando Magic at 25.5. They won 22 games last year. They add Paolo Banchero. Franz Wagner has looked amazing this summer over in Europe. They have any team that has two dynamic wings like that can play make and create for others, along with we know all their talented guards, and then they have a good center in Wendell Carter Jr. I just think they will. They're not going to make the playoffs or anything this first year, I wouldn't think, but I really like the group of team the group they're forming. I'm a little worried about their shooting overall. That's probably going to be their main reason why they don't make the playoffs. But I think Franz and Paulo could carry them to at least 26 wins.
You stole my thunder, man. That is my dark horse team in the East
stole your
this
magic.
year. You stole my magic, yeah. The Magic I had on my list. No, I absolutely agree. Like, they won 22 games last year. It's only 3.5 more. And they're going to get better because they're young. And you bring in Banchero. Like, it makes no sense why it's only 25.5.
Yeah.
I think they win at least 30 games. I think there is a bigger chance than people think that they make a play-in spot in the East. Mm-hmm. If Banchero can come in and be kind of like that, borderline star-level facilitator, and then I think Wagner can take that jump into a borderline all-star. Wendell Carter Jr. is underrated. I had him in my top 100, and he wasn't completely at the bottom. Like, he's a guy that people don't realize has developed into a good starting big man in the league. You still have Bob, but yeah. I mean, Suggs, if he could take a shot. Cole Anthony. They got a lot of pieces, man. Now, how does it all fit? I don't know, but they have a lot of upside. They're giving me the same vibes that Cleveland gave me last year, and I wasn't confident enough in Cleveland. I said, if there's a team that surprises anyone out of the East, it's going to be Cleveland. I said that last year, but I had them like 13th in my standings, and they looked phenomenal. And this year, my dark horse pick is Orlando. But speaking of Cleveland, that's my next over-under, okay? The line for Cleveland is 46.5 wins, okay? Last year, they won 44 games, Eric, and they were extremely banged up. Mm-hmm. Extremely banged up. Now, hopefully they have a healthier season, and you add Donovan Mitchell, and their core is very young, so you expect them to get better. And somehow they won 44 games last year. Somehow the line is only 46.5. I got to take the over on Cleveland. I don't see how they only improved 2.5 games unless last year was just an absolute fluke, but I don't think that's the case. I think Evan Mobley takes a jump to like a borderline 20-point per game guy, potentially. It is their third scorer. Jared Allen still, for what he does, is a perfect fit for that team. And then you got a top 3 backcourt in the league with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland has improved a ton the past couple of years. If he improves at the same rate, like he's an all-NBA guard. Like, he's a borderline top 20 player already, in my opinion. Same with Donovan Mitchell. Too much talent on that team. You got some intriguing players off the bench. Kevin Love's still there. I would maybe go over 50 wins for the Cavs. I am absolutely drinking the Cavalier Kool-Aid once again. I am with the Cavs this year, Eric.
That was my second most confident pick. So we're 2 for 2 so far.
This is why I wanted to not tell each other what our picks were to see how much we agreed.
So, yeah, that means absolutely smash the over on these in Vegas, right? Same reasons you said. They won 44 last year, added, really good player in Donovan Mitchell. Didn't really take anything away from their rotation by getting him. And I love their bench. I think it's led obviously by several veterans, but I think they're deep enough to withstand some injuries where they weren't last year. And I just think they're going to easily be up near the top of the East standings.
Yep. What is your third team to
Uh,
take the under on?
my third team is the Denver Nuggets at 49.5.
Or the over on? The over
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
the over. The Nuggets won 48 last year without Jamal Murray all season. Michael Porter Jr. missed most of the season as well. Now you can't count on him necessarily to play even if he is healthy, but getting both of those guys back and adding Contavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown, along with having Jokic, who can carry a roster to pretty much 50 wins in his sleep every year. I just think they're poised to make a bounce back up near the top of the standings in the West. I just think they should easily win around 50 games. So,
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, logically, they should be over for me. I don't know. I get a weird vibe from them. that this is terrible analysis, not as good as your analysis. I don't know. I would have a hard time putting money on them because I can't expect MPJ to stay healthy. Jamal Murray, hopefully he's solid. It just seems like even with those guys, like they're definitely better, but even with those guys, like they're right around a 50-win team. And Jokic has been able to stay healthy. I feel like if you take Jokic out of the equation, that's a lottery team. So if he ever misses any time, like there's a reason he's won MVP the past couple years. So I am more confident in a different team. Okay? And somebody in chat is going to be happy. My third team that I'm taking the over on is the Toronto Raptors, who, dude, these numbers do seem low for the over-under win totals. Like, it's kind of baffling. Last year, the Toronto Raptors won 48 games. Their line this year is 44.5. How do the Raptors get any worse?
I feel like a lot of this is just they're expecting like everyone to be better, so no team's going to win as many games. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, Raptors were definitely one of my last teams I was trying to decide between to putting on my list.
Yeah, I mean, like, OG Anunoby missed some time last year. Pascal Siakam, I don't know if he was fully healthy last year. It's not like, I don't remember them being a super healthy team last year. You still have some young pieces that are going to take a jump. The obvious one is Scotty Barnes going into his second year. If he takes any sort of jump, I don't see any way that they don't win at least 45 games. Everybody else is younger in their primes. Like, you're not going to get regression from anyone.
Precious was coming along at the end of the year as well.
Yeah. So they didn't address their backup point guard spot, did they?
No, and I think that's one of their. But I think they think their big forwards could just take over for that. But
yeah, I mean, but they did play Van Fleet like almost 38 minutes a game last year. Same with Siakam. If you do that, then there could be some downside here if you continue to kind of play those guys more minutes than anybody else in the league. But I mean, talent-wise, I just don't see how they get 4 games worse unless something drastic happens, injuries or whatever. So that's a team that I'm super confident in with Toronto.
Yeah, I like it.
All right.
Like I said, there was a lot of teams that I like, so it was hard.
Yeah. Let me throw this back up on the screen. Dude, I realized I didn't actually pick my unders. So I picked one of them. I'm having a tough time. I'm going to let you go first. These numbers feel low. Who's your first under?
Like I said, I'm not really super confident in any of the unders, but Reese, you just stole my thunder. Thanks. So I have the Charlotte Hornets at 36.5. This is not their fault, but losing Miles Bridges for nothing, he was really big for them last year, had a great season. And to have him just off the team without any sort of compensation for it, that's going to be really tough for them to overcome. I feel like they still have decent enough guards, but that was one thing they needed was, their big men, forwards, stuff like that, to improve, to take that next step to the playoffs. And I feel like they didn't really have an opportunity to address that because of the Miles Bridges situation. So I'm taking the under for them. You're muted.
You're right. That's interesting. They're always a team that hovers right around the play-in, but doesn't get the job, doesn't get into the playoffs, but they do have some youth, so I have a hard time betting against them. But I don't know.
That was
man.
with Miles Bridges, though. They don't have.
Yeah. But you do got LaMelo. Hopefully, Mark Williams is like their rim protecting lob target center that they've needed. It's just they're not doing much to shake things up, and it feels like this year, if they don't have success, this is going to be the year they shake things up at the deadline. Either that's going on a younger timeline, trying to rebuild, but it's like this team hasn't been good enough to make the playoffs, but in the lottery, you're getting Mark Williams. Like, he's not going to ever become a star. Unless maybe he can. Maybe he's the next Rudy Gobert. I don't know, man. But he's not a super high upside prospect. Where are you going to get your second star? I don't mind that pick at all. That's a pretty solid pick. My first one might surprise people. My first under is the New Orleans Pelicans at 44.5.
Ooh. If I had to bet, I'd take the over, but I'm interested to see what you would say.
I don't trust Zion to stay healthy. B, I don't trust them to be anything but a bottom, 6 to 8 defense. I think CJ's a fine leader, and you got Ingram there. I think they're a 500 team. You're talking about a West that's absolutely loaded. Yes, they had some good moments last year, but if you're starting CJ, Zion, Brandon Ingram, Valanciunas, I just don't think your defense is going to be anything but average at best. Okay, offensively, it should be a decent team. I just feel like the pieces fit kind of weird. Like, if you're putting the ball in Zion's hands consistently, if he's healthy, I don't know. I don't like Ingram as a number 3 off of CJ and Zion. Ingram's shooting regressed last year. He's also had moments where he's a little bit banged up. He's not injury prone by any means, but I feel like their pieces fit kind of weird on offense. Valanciunas, I don't think, is the right center. And he can shoot a little bit, but I would like to see a more athletic, maybe a more skilled center next to Zion. Zion's just a weird player to fit in as the best player on a team. I don't know if he can be the best player on a winning team, and if he's not the best player, I don't see New Orleans being like a 46-47 win team in a loaded Western Conference. I think they're right around a 500 team. So I don't like New Orleans. Reese says CJ is the number 2. What? CJ is the number 2. He had the ball more in his hands last year than Ingram did down the stretch. Without Zion, he was the number 1. So CJ is the number 2. He's more of a facilitator. I think he took more shots than Ingram. But regardless, you don't have to differentiate them as 2 and 3. I just never been the biggest fan of Brandon Ingram. He can get hot, but I don't know, man. Weird vibes from that team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it's always a caveat when it comes to Zion, because if Zion misses most of the year again, I think that's definitely a good pick to pick the under. But if Zion's able to play most of the year, despite being a weird fit or whatever, that guy's one of the most efficient scorers on offense of all time. So I don't think you can really say that that's hard to make work, having a guy like that. But yeah, defense will definitely be a problem.
It's not hard to make work. I just don't think it's the best fit offensively. And the thing is, they're going to be a good offense, but I think they're going to have their offense carry them. And I don't think the pieces necessarily fit well enough for their offense to carry them to 48 wins or so, or in that range. Their over-under's 44.5. I don't think their offense is good enough to carry them to the over in a loaded Western Conference, because I don't trust the defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was some proposed rumor floating around today of Jackson Hayes and Devontae Graham for Buddy Hield, and as Ishfluent says in chat, they have no shooting. I think if they can make a move like that, get out of Devontae Graham's third year remaining on his contract and get another piece. And the main part of that would be if they had some big contracts like Buddy Hield's, they could pretty much put themselves in a position to make another CJ like trade at a different position with all the draft picks they have. So I'd look for them to make a big move maybe later in the season to kind of solidify some of their problems, because if they do struggle out of the gates, I think David Griffin will continue trying to make moves to make it better. And yeah, I don't know if they'll work or not, but I think he will try to fix it and won't just like let it play out as them being bad like last season.
Yeah. So assuming they start Herb Jones as that fifth guy with Valanciunas, Zion, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum. Obviously, CJ's the best shooter out of that group. Who's the second best shooter?
Didn't Herb shoot pretty good last year?
He shot like 34%. He trailed off near the end of the season.
I mean, he was shooting good. I mean, Ingram, you would think would bounce back. Maybe last year was just an outlier, but if I'm not mistaken, the 2 seasons prior, he was decent.
Yeah. He was like 38, 39% the 2 years prior, but then 33% last year. So they're going to need him to bounce back. Because your second best shooter is a guy who shot 33% last year, or a guy who shot 34% last year. And you got Valanciunas out there who shoots some threes. Let me see what Valanciunas shot. He shot 36% from 3, but he only shot 2 a game. Like, he's not super respected as a floor spacer type of guy. But he has been solid from 3 the past 3 years, 35% to 37%, kind of right in that range. So, I mean, is Valanciunas your second best shooter in the lineup? You know what I mean? It's just the shooting's questionable too. Like, I just don't think the offense is going to be elite. And if the offense isn't elite, I don't see them winning 45 games or more. That's my take on New Orleans.
Yeah.
So
fair enough.
What's your next under?
My next under is, let's go with the Oklahoma City Thunder at 26.5. Obviously, this is only because Chet got hurt. If he was healthy, I believe they would probably win more than this. The over-under would probably be a little higher too. But I see a scenario where they're going to get eyes for Victor Wembanyama, and they are going to pull an OKC at some point in this season and make sure they have as good of a chance as anyone else to get him. And I mean, why not? If Chet's missing the year, they're not going to make the playoffs or win or anything. So why not try to pair Chet with Wemby and just form that? Maybe even it'd be hard to top that Twin Tower lineup in terms of defensive and offensive ability when you put both sides of the ball together, man. So I could see them going for that, even if they start playing well at any stretch of the season.
I'm going to choose a team like for all the same reasons, but a different team. I'm taking the under on Utah at 26.5.
Mm-hmm.
You still got some pieces there, but I don't expect them to stay there. Okay, yeah. Whether it's they get traded this offseason or they get traded next season at some point. Mm-hmm. That's Bojan Bogdanovic is one of them. Mike Conley potentially can be another, but he's a little bit harder to move. You got Jared Vanderbilt there. It doesn't even sound like they're necessarily keen on keeping him. And it's obvious what the Jazz are doing. The Jazz are starting a rebuild, loading up on picks, and they're going to tank next season. Jordan Clarkson's still there. They brought in Lauri Markkanen. Maybe they see if... I think their whole plan is Markkanen. They're going to see if he can become a star-level scorer, and if he does, then that's a better trade asset than he was considered when they got him, and they can turn that into picks. Danny Ainge is going to turn these guys into picks. I think these guys are going to be playing for them, knowing that they're not going to be there at the end of the season. And you're talking about, as I said, a loaded West. There's 10, maybe 11 good teams. If like Sacramento takes a jump this year, they got some okay pieces. I don't see Utah being... I'd see Utah being right around that number right now, and I think they're going to trade some of these pieces and tank and go after Wembanyama and get the next Gobert, but like offensively he is a million times better than Gobert, so I think Utah's under at 26.5 is a good pick.
Yeah, just depends on their mindset. New rookie coach. Is it kind of like with Chauncey last year where he coaches hard, but no matter what he does, Ainge doesn't give him the roster to compete night in and night out. So yeah, I could definitely see a scenario where they tank because the picks they got in the trade aren't necessarily going to be high draft picks. So the value of those trades has to lie in their own picks being good. And if they're not, that they're going to find it troubling to try and fix that rebuild and get back to where they want to be in a few years. So yeah, I definitely could see them taking this year.
Yep. Who's your third under?
My third one is the team with the highest win total, and that is the Boston Celtics. I could see them winning. Maybe they're just really good and could win 55 games plus. I love that they got Brogdon. I just think the top of the East is so tough this year. There's 4 or 5 good teams, if you include Cleveland in there, that I just think they're all going to be kind of battling it out, and I don't think one of those teams is going to separate. And I do think a lot of their win total last year was inflated, obviously, by a huge stretch where I think they only lost like 2 games out of like 20-some. And I just think they might have a little bit of a hangover from losing in the finals as well. So, yeah, I think they're still going to be a really, really good team. And this isn't like slighting them at all. I just think that they're going to have a tough time making sure they're like an elite team. I don't think they're going to win like 60 games or anything like that.
Yeah. I agree. I'm going to go with a different playoff team. I wanted to go with at least one playoff team. I'm going to go with a playoff team from the Western Conference from last year. They had a successful playoffs last year. What's up?
I know who you're going to pick.
You know who I'm going to pick?
Yep.
I mean, I've been on the...
You always hate on this team.
But I have sound reasoning.
Okay.
I have sound reasoning. My pick is Dallas. Mm-hmm. At 48.5. That's their line. 48.5. Last year they won 52 games. I think the West is better this year, so knock a couple down. But their second best player, Eric, is Christian Wood. Christian Wood has never been a part of a successful team in the NBA. He can put up numbers. There's been question marks about whether his game translates to winning basketball. Defensively, I've had people try and say he's a good defensive player. I don't think he is. I think he's a little bit of a weird fit. I think they could maybe make it work, but I think it's tough losing out on that secondary creator that could create at the level that Jalen Brunson could. You got a scorer there with Tim Hardaway Jr., but he's not a creator. Who else is going to create for them defensively? I don't like. I'm not a Dinwiddie fan either. He's not super. He's inefficient as a scorer.
I know you don't like him, but he can create.
He can create. He's not a dual threat in terms of somebody that'll create for others and like efficiently score the ball. He can have some games where he's hot and he'll drop 20, 25, but over the course of a season, last year, let me look at Dinwiddie's stats. He was more inefficient than I feel like people realize. Last year shot 41.5% from the field, 34% from 3. True shooting percentage last year for Dinwiddie was 54%, which was a little bit better than I thought, but he was 50% in Washington, 62% in Dallas. Maybe Dallas is a good situation for them, but the reason Dallas took a jump last year was they were a top 5 or 6 defense. I feel like this is going to be one of those years. I feel like this is going to be a little bit like the Knicks last year, where Tom Thibodeau comes in, turns them into a top 5 defense, but they overachieved on that end, and then last year they kind of regressed back to the mean, weren't as good of a defensive team. I get the same vibes from Dallas. I don't feel like they're going to be a top 5 defense again. I feel like it's going to be one of those things where they overachieve defensively during the regular season. The West is tougher. You don't have Brunson. Woods never played for a winning team. I don't think Dallas is getting to 49 wins. I'm taking the under on them.
Yeah, it's another team that could have a hangover. We saw Portland the year after they made the Western Conference Finals also take a huge step backwards. So yeah, it definitely could happen. But much like Jokic, I just think Luka's too good, and I think he can carry a bad roster. Even if everything you say is true, I still think Luka's good enough to carry him. But I don't think that's like a terrible bet or anything.
The thing is, though, you still got so much star talent in the West that could carry teams, right? Like healthy Dame in Portland, you know what I mean? Like at some point, some of that cancels out and like teams don't reach higher win totals because the West is just loaded. So that is definitely something.
But you haven't been high on Dallas's roster in the past, and Lucas still carried him.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not winning 52 games last year if they're not a top 5 defense, which they were like a, fifth, sixth ranked defense last year. It was Luka carried them in the past, but they were always like a middling playoff team at best because their defense wasn't good enough. Just like Portland, when they have a bottom, 3 defense, yeah, they can get the 6th seed, but they play a beat-up Denver team, they can't make it past the first round. When they were getting 3 seeds, their defense was better, right? One of those years, it was the 9th ranked defense, or the 8th ranked, somewhere in there. It was a top 10 defense. Dallas took that leap to 52 wins because they were top 5, 6 defense. I don't see them being top 10 again. I think they're an average defense at best. I don't know, it seems like Wood might cause some locker room issues that don't come out, and there's some that do come out, like he quit on a coach last year. Supposedly there was a whole thing in Houston with like Kevin Porter Jr., and that was just a mess. That was a tanking team, obviously, but I don't trust him. He's never been a part of a winning team, and him being the second guy instead of Brunson, I don't think is a good thing for Dallas. I think that's a downgrade too. So
I will say, I think Dinwiddie had some really special moments last year, including in the playoffs, and I felt like once he got out of that situation in Washington, he was pretty good the last half of the year. But
yeah, he was good in Dallas. He shot 40% from the 3-point line in Dallas in 23 regular season games. I don't have his playoff stats on me, but the previous, even including last year, the previous 5 seasons, he hasn't shot 34% from 3. He shot below that every single year. So I feel like he's overachieved a little bit in Dallas.
Yeah.
I can't trust him to stay efficient. And he's had some injury problems over the course of his career, missed a couple of seasons due to that. So it'll be interesting. Dallas is kind of a wild card in the West, but honestly, spoiler, I would put Portland ahead of them in the standings. And you guys know I'm not super high on Portland, and I've gotten heat for it, but I would put Portland ahead of Dallas right now.
I feel like this is a replay of every offseason the last 3 years.
Well, Portland was ahead of Dallas a couple years ago.
Not that this is like not that that's a bad thing or anything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But the thing is I'm not analyzing this based on how I analyzed them last year. It's a different team now. We're going to go back and look at these at the end of the season to see who's right, see who's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But I don't trust a team with Christian Wood as their second best player, no matter how good their best player is.
I'm just thinking back to the... I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this to. Actually, I do, because I saw Salty in here and he's been a jerk to us lately. So, yeah, I was thinking back to your prediction in the second round last year, and then they went on to beat the Suns. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't expecting Phoenix to absolutely fold like a lawn chair, man. Yeah. I mean. I don't know what to say about that. Like, Dallas took me by surprise last year, but they were a good, I don't think anybody saw them being a borderline top 5 defense, especially bringing in Jason Kidd as coach. Mm-hmm. I guess Jason Kidd has improved as a coach, but man, I don't expect them to repeat it. Like, it's just their the defensive personnel on that team is not, I have a hard time saying it's good. You got a couple key defensive pieces, like Finney-Smith's nice.
Yeah.
But their defensive personnel is not good. Just like New York's wasn't, and look what happened to them last year.
Well, that means that the schemes had to have been good.
Yeah, I don't think that, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think that's all you need to be a top 5 defense. I hope it is, because this year we're a top 5 defense and we're going to the finals. If we're, as Portland. But I don't know. I see them regressing. It'll be interesting. I'll watch this back after the season. Mm-hmm. We'll have a stream where we kind of like recap this, or maybe I'll do a video recapping preseason predictions, but it'll be fun to look back on this.
Yeah. For me, just for the record, I have felt the way you felt about two teams that you have absolutely felt this way about in the past. You kind of you didn't quite say as much about Denver this year, but Denver and Dallas, you have made these comments about seemingly the last couple of off seasons as well. And I, just for the record, am done doubting if Jokic and Luka can carry teams. They 100% can, and I just believe that they can do that no matter what their teammates are. So
I'm not even doubting Denver. I think Denver will be.
I said you changed it this year, but in previous years you kind of made the same comments you were saying about Dallas this year, about Denver as well, how they were overrated, and you didn't see them being as good as they were the previous season and all that.
Yeah. I mean, Jokic improved defensively, and it took me a while to realize that Jokic was like actually an okay defensive player. I feel like Jokic is underrated on the defensive end now. And I was a guy who used to say Jokic is an awful defender. How could they have a decent defense? But, I mean, Aaron Gordon, for as much as we joked about him in the past, he's a solid defensive player. And you got Jokic, who's improved defensively. Like, people have to give him credit. I feel like people get stuck thinking about how he used to be, and, like, he doesn't look like he'd be a good defender. But he's okay, right? And I don't know, man. It's just like Jamal Murray after an injury and Michael Porter Jr. and like he's like chronically injured. I don't know. Like, yeah, that would be nice to have offensively, but Jokic does so much for them offensively already. And those two guys, I don't think bringing them in is going to make them better defensively. If anything, it might make them worse. So, like, I don't see them taking a huge jump even with those guys back this year is kind of where I'm at with them. But I still expect them to get, especially with the West being tougher, I expect them to be about right where they were last year. 47, 48 wins.
But KCP and Bruce Brown are two elite perimeter defenders that they have not had in the past.
Yeah. But, I mean, how much are you playing Jamal and Michael Porter Jr.? Because you can kind of hunt Michael Porter Jr., I think, at this point.
I mean, maybe they limit his minutes so that he doesn't get hurt. I don't know.
Yeah. But then, you know, not much of an impact of his minutes being limited. So that's why it's hard to figure out with Denver. A lot of people, I feel like, are just like, oh, they get Murray and Michael Porter Jr. back to a 48-win team. Yeah, they're going to win like 53 games next year. But I feel like it's more nuanced than that. I don't see them taking a jump into like the mid-50s in terms of win totals, which I've seen some people say.
I mean, Jamal Murray, last time we saw him in the playoffs was like carrying them. They made the Western Conference Finals in the bubble.
I mean, TJ Warren was playing phenomenal in the bubble too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, he was nice.
So they played 19 games that year in the bubble. In the playoffs, made the Western Conference Finals. He averaged 26.5 points per game, 45.3% three-point shooting, and 50% overall.
So you think he's that player?
No, I'm just saying, like, I think we're forgetting because he's been out for a year and a half.
I'm not forgetting. Yeah. I just, like, I don't think he's that consistently. He can have those moments, but it's also the dude's coming off a major injury. I can't just assume he's going to be exactly what he was in the past, and what he was in the past wasn't quite that good. Like, he was phenomenal in the bubble, absolutely, you know? So he's still a really good player. What were they offensively last year in terms of ranking? Reese is in chat. Reese, figure out the ranking. I know you know all that stuff off the top of your head. But if you could look that up. Let me thank a donut. Oh, we forgot to thank this. Gray Hughes donated like 15 minutes ago. Thank you, Gray. Sorry for not realizing you donated. $5 donut from Gray Hughes. It says, I am pumped on the Blazers roster. 50 wins or more. Boom. I know I am a homer, but that's what I see. Gray is taking the over plus 10 wins. Because the over-under is 40.5. Gray is saying it should be 50.5. Thank you, Gray, for the $5 dono for the 50 wins the Blazers are going to win this year.
I mean, don't complain about getting free money. Just bet on it.
What do you mean?
I mean, like if you think their over/under should be 50 wins, then that's easy money, right?
Yeah.
That's the definition of easy money.
For Gray?
Yeah.
I thought you were talking to me. I was confused. Yeah, there you go. Easy money.
They were 15th defensively, Reese, not offensively.
Oh, Reese, I'm so disappointed in you. You've been too feisty in here, giving me crap to say that. Come on now.
6th offensively, 15th defensively. Net rating of 12.
Yeah, I mean, I see them being a top 5 offense this year with those guys back. I don't see them being any better defensively. And the West is tougher, man. Like, honestly, from the win total last year, I'm knocking 2 or 3 games off the start from teams.
And who had this? I think it was MD. Says if you don't pick the Hawks and Suns, you're missing out on easy unders. What do you think of that statement?
What?
Here.
Wait, no. How is the Suns an easy under? The Suns won 64 games last year in the regular season and are bringing back the same team, and their over-under line is 52.5. So you think it's easy to bet the same team as last year wins like 15 less games?
13 less. Yeah, to me, that's crazy.
Yeah, but like if you say it's an easy under, then you're assuming it's even more than 13 wins. Like it's not even close.
I'm staying away from it, but yeah, I think people are sleeping on the Suns being like bad all of a sudden. I think they're definitely good. I think they're. I mean, yeah, you could argue CP3 is a year older and all that, but you should have Dario Saric back this year, assuming it doesn't get traded. They're probably going to trade Jay Crowder and get, whether it's Bojan Bogdanovic or someone, they're going to add another piece there that way. That might be a mistake, but yeah, McGee I don't think is that big of a loss because Biyombo came in and played pretty well when both McGee and Ayton were out last year. So I don't really think I see them winning more than 52. If I had to bet one or the other, I would bet the over.
I agree.
But I don't think it's easy money at all.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Saltius says Suns are the new Jazz. I mean, the Jazz though would win, 50 games or whatever. I mean, last year they were a little bit worse, but they were still at 49. So yeah, I would, if I had to choose, I'd take the over. The over-under line for Atlanta, because that was the other team you said, right?
Yeah.
46.5. They bring in DeJounte Murray. After winning 43 games last year, they bring in DeJounte Murray. They needed help defensively. They get one of the best defensive guard and also a second creator, the guy that like Trae Young could play off of. They got DeAndre Hunter if he can be healthy. They got AJ Griffin in the draft.
They still have both centers. Assuming Capella isn't completely washed and gets back to somewhat normal.
If he's washed, Okongwu, I could see taking a step this year.
Right.
To cancel that out. So Eric, if I had to choose over or under for Atlanta, I wouldn't bet on this, but I would lean towards over, actually, which is funny that it says it's easy money, the unders for both these teams, because I would lean towards over on both of them.
I agree. Yeah, I think I would too. MD also says, don't forget about that Ayton contract stuff. Well, I don't know if you've seen Ayton since he signed his max deal, but that was all just posturing, and they are totally he's totally fine now. Like he's not bad at all, and they still could trade him. But if they trade Ayton, it's going to be a good player coming back. They're not going to just trade him for like Russell Westbrook or something. Like they're going to get something good for him. So. I agree. I would probably take the over in both of those teams.
Yep. Agreed. Who said that? Who said that the unders are easy money on those?
It was MD.
MD?
Yeah.
MD, we'll see who's right at the end of the season. I'm looking forward to watching this stream back. You can come after the season and say, see, I told you I was right. It was easy unders on both those teams. Mm-hmm. All right? come leave a comment after the season. Yeah. Hopefully you remember this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like out of the realm of possibility. I would be surprised even if there was bad vibes with the Suns, that it cost them that big of a fall off. I just don't see that happening. Their bench wasn't very good last year either, and not that it improved or anything because they didn't really do much outside of just re-signing Ayton, but some of those guys had a much better year the season prior, and you would think that maybe they would get back to form on that. But it still remains to be seen because they still technically have their tax mid-level exception and they're trying to trade players right now. So their final roster is one of those teams that might not be set yet, just like the Jazz we talked about earlier, still looking to move. And those might be good trade partners between the two of them.
Yep, I agree. So as one last look at this to wrap up this segment, here were the over-under numbers that we're working off of. Me and Eric agreed on the overs for the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic at 46.5 and 25.5 respectively. I had an over on Toronto at 44.5, and then Eric, you had an over on, who'd you say, Denver?
Denver, yeah.
At 49.5. And then for unders, I went New Orleans at 44.5, Utah at 26.5, and Dallas at 48.5. You went under on OKC at 26.5, Boston at 55.5, and then who was your other team?
Hornets at 36.5.
Hornets at 36.5. So we agreed on two overs, Cleveland and Orlando there in the East.
Two more teams I want to talk about real quick.
Yeah.
Los Angeles Lakers at 45.5. Are you not touching that at all, or are you?
I go under.
Yeah.
I go under. I mean, who knows how the locker room stays together? Who knows if AD can stay healthy? Who knows if LeBron finally regresses? Because that's definitely possible, right? Like, he's 37 years old. The pieces are weird. I feel like they didn't really bring in anybody to fix their issues last year, except maybe Pat Bev. But you're gonna have Pat Bev with Russ. Like, if they if they trade Russ for Hield and Miles Turner, I'm not touching that line. Like, I think that's a good line if they trade Russ for Miles Turner and Buddy Hield or something like that. But as it stands, I would lean towards under. They're a 500 team.
Yeah, I do like bringing in Thomas Bryant and Damian Jones. I think they should be better at the center position than they were last year. But yeah, I still think they need to trade Westbrook. Even if things like are okay at the beginning of the season, I just feel like it's a ticking time bomb that's gonna come back to bite them if he's still on the roster at some point.
Absolutely. And then what was the other team you want to talk about?
The Brooklyn Nets. Would you just take I was tempted to say under just because the dumpster fire that is the Nets could also explode at any minute. So maybe that's a safe play to just think that's going to come off the rails at some point. But I could also see them all staying and actually having a good season, and some of their additions I like. So I could see them easily winning 50 games again too.
They are too talented for me to take the under on.
Mm-hmm.
They could absolutely be under with all the turmoil. I mean, you know, we've talked about Brooklyn all off season. And Kyrie, how many games does he want to play, and how many games does he actually play? And, you know, Kyrie's this whole other thing, right? Other than KD and his trade demand that never came true, but maybe he'll want out again or something. I don't know. Yeah, they could absolutely be under. I'm not even saying that's a bad bet, but for me, I cannot take the under on a team with that much talent on it in the preseason. I just can't.
Yeah.
There's too many other, like, bets that I would be confident in than betting on a team to be under that has the talent that would suggest that they'd be over.
Right.
So that's how I look at it.
Agreed.
Bruce Brown's in Denver, definitive. That is somebody that the Nets lost, but they brought in Royce O'Neal. Like, Joe Harris was injured last season. They had some injury issues. How many games did they win last year? Even with all that, they still won 44 games last year. Right. And Kyrie played like 20-some games, and they were injured. So, yeah. I can't go under.
Yep. And in theory, I mean, who knows if he'll play, but they get Ben Simmons as well. That's going to be a
Oh yeah, I forgot about Ben Simmons. Yeah.
fascinating storyline if he plays or not. And then, yeah, TJ Warren hasn't played in 2 years, but that's someone that was trending towards being a really good scorer in this league. And if he can provide some of that scoring punch if any of their stars miss games, I mean, that's a pretty loaded roster, man.
Yeah, I agree. Um, so final thing I want to talk about. It's in the stream title. I want to touch upon like scheme things for a second. Maybe scheme things we wanted to see on the offensive or defensive end. It's been a while since we've talked X's and O's, Eric, and I honestly thought, you know what, I kind of want to talk some X's and O's because we didn't talk about it during the tanking season because we were tanking. It's been since like January, man. That's like one of the things I feel like we do best. It's been like 8 months since we've been able to talk X's and O's in a way that makes any sort of sense. So, off the top of your head, I'll let you go first. Is there anything off the top of your head, like scheme-wise, on either end of the floor, that you want to see this team try next season or do differently? It could be offensive sets, it could be a defensive scheme, or a way to play defense technique-wise, or anything. Like, is there anything you have in mind?
Yeah, let's start with the offensive end just to kind of keep it neat and tidy. I want to see them play through some of their different ball handlers other than Ant and Dame. I want to see them use, if Winslow's going to play, I want to see them use him. If Gary Payton's going to play, I want to see them let him handle the ball some. I want to play through Nurk at the high post a little more. Or if you're going to play through the lower block with him, have it more of like a design play where it's not just him straight posting up and trying to score, making something out of a double team. And then Josh Hart, I feel like, can run the offense as well. So we have a lot of players that I think are going to be good at running the offense. And now we have three players that I really like spotting up off ball in Dame, Ant, and Grant. So if you can find a way for the other two players in the lineup to set up the offense while those other players get open off ball, or maybe due to creation of someone like Hart, get kickouts for wide open shots that they're not used to getting as open of looks as they could possibly get. It's just something I'd like to see them do, is play those guys off ball more.
Yeah. I mean, you got 5 guys in the starting lineup if it's Josh Hart, 4 guys if it's Nas, but I mean, maybe Nas has some growth as a passer, but like you got a lot of guys on this team that can pass the ball. I think it's a situation where whoever's playing small forward, assuming that's, I have to set it up this way. You don't have to designate a difference necessarily between shooting guard and small forward. So if Josh Hart and Gary Payton II come off the bench, like they'll match up against the guys that they need to match up on against defensively, and then on the offensive end, like Josh Hart will probably have a more facilitatory role in whatever sets they run, where Gary Payton II will be used more as a cutter and maybe in the dunker spot. Nasir Little, I think, will also be... It would be good to have him used more as a cutter and in the dunker spot sometimes. And I feel like off the ball and just within sets and within a system, Nasir Little and Gary Payton II can play in similar ways, right? I think that it would be... I mean, I watch Golden State, and everything offensively goes back to like Golden State and how the stuff that they run. But they run a lot of good like 3-man actions with Steph, Clay, and somebody else off the ball, where they're running some split action, which is basically where, I don't know how to explain it. You guys can Google it. It will do a better job. Like, find a video on it, split action, if you want to after the stream. But some split action with Dame and Ant. Just utilize those guys shooting with cutters in some 3-man action where you have a guy that can slip a screen and catch a lob backdoor like Nasir Little or Gary Payton II, and then you have Dame or Ant read the situation, and either, they can always come off for a handoff if Nurk has the ball at the top of the arc, or can always, turn the corner and cut downhill. the Warriors do a really good job of that, and they utilize Steph and Klay's shooting and the attention to get some other guys some easy buckets, but then also utilizing those two guys together off the ball gives defenses fits, because defenses, if Steph Curry's off the ball running off a screen, defenses tend to try to shade towards him and help on him because he's Steph Curry. But then if Klay Thompson's in that screen, it's tough to do that because what? You're going to potentially leave Klay Thompson a little bit more open than he should be, and then he's shooting some catch-and-shoot open threes. So it's really hard to kind of shade towards one or the other because you have two really talented shooters with Steph and Klay. I think you can have the same thing with Dame and Ant, and that's what I'd like to see. And you have the guys that can pass. As you said, Josh Hart, I think, honestly, like Grant can make basic reads, and then Nurkic. Utilize those guys passing. Get Dame and Ant easier shots that they don't have to work so hard for, and then utilize the attention to get guys like Gary Payton II, Nasir Little, some open buckets cutting to the rim, some lobs, some backdoor stuff. That sort of thing is what I'd love to see on offense.
Yeah, you mentioned the dunker spot. I would like to see Nurk operate a little more around the basket versus trying to catch the ball near the top of the key or whatever and making his action off the dribble. I'd like to have him get in a situation where he's catching more balls around the rim and could just go up strong right away without having to avoid a defender or anything like that. Maybe even catch some lob passes in there. And then in terms of Nas and Peyton, it's like, I understand why Nas, they're trying to develop his outside shot, so you want him to spot up sometimes, but I feel like at times in the past, it was kind of hard to tell last year under Chauncey because, like you said, we kind of gave up on trying to learn what this scheme was trying to be because we weren't really trying to do anything in particular. But I feel like if we have more action where it's like in this situation you need to cut versus just you can decide whether or not you want to spot up for three or cut. So like having more actions where if you do this, you cut baseline or whatever, and that should be open, and getting those guys to think more about it. Now Peyton's coming from a system where he did that, so hopefully that just translates straight across to the Blazers. But someone like Nas, instead of spotting up as much as he does, I feel like it would actually make it easier to shoot threes when he is wide open if he is also cutting more often, because that would make the defender have to play off him more because they're worried about his cutting. So I completely agree about that.
Yeah, just got to be cognizant of when cutting opportunities are available. There's too many times where like Al-Farouq Aminu, Mo Harkless in the past would just sit in the corner shooting spot-up corner threes when they didn't have their shot going. Instead, they could have, cut to the rim, especially on like Nurkic short rolls, him catching the ball off a pick and roll that's extended because the Blazers like to extend a lot. Pick and rolls, Dame can hit deep threes from 30 feet. It gives them more space to potentially attack. But then also in that situation, if Dame gets trapped, you're passing Nurkic the ball and he's kind of getting around the free throw line. In that situation, a lot of times you'd have like Al-Farouq Aminu's guy or Mo Harkless's guy in the past would help onto Nurkic, and then they'd be open in the corner, Harkless or Aminu. Mm-hmm. You kick the ball out to them, and they were okay shooters, but weren't consistently making teams pay. And then also, it's if you have them in the corner, if you have somebody else on their side of the floor, the defense can rotate to them. If that's Gary Payton II or Nasir Little in that corner, every single time, I want those guys cutting to the rim for a lob, where Nurkic catches the ball, and if their guy helps onto Nurkic too much, then he's throwing a lob to Gary Payton II or Nas. If their guy isn't necessarily helping to Nurkic, then Nurkic goes down the lane, finish strong, finish at the rim, dunk on someone, right? If somebody else helps, if it's Grant's guy, Simons, Lillard's, I'd take those guys spotting up from three. You know what I mean? Like that's how you beat the attention that's given to Dame on pick and rolls that teams trap him. Mm-hmm. That's how you do it. The problem is we'd have and there were times where we had issues with the trap when it wasn't necessarily due to like Al-Farouq Aminu not shooting well enough. Like in that Pelican series, he actually shot from a phenomenal 3-point percentage. It was other things that we struggled with the trap with, so it's more complicated than just this. But if your guy helps onto a short rolling Nurkic around the free throw line, cut to the rim if
Yep.
you're Nas or Gary Payton II. You're athletic freaks. And Nurkic can throw a lob. And if you're running a bench unit and that's Trendon Watford, same thing. Watford can pass too. Watford can throw a lob. Andy likes that little floater if they don't help all the way onto him. So that's what they got to do. That's what I need to see more of. That needs to be an emphasis from those guys. Obviously, if Nas is on fire from 3, okay, fine. If he spots up in the corner and gets another open 3 and he's shooting the ball well, sure. But Nas has never proven to be consistent from 3. He'll have 1 month, he'll shoot 38, 39%. He'll have 1 month, he'll shoot 26%. When his shot's not going, every single time in that situation, he should be cutting. And same thing with Gary Payton II, who's also a little questionable as a three-point shooter. That's how you can keep defenses honest, even if you're not shooting the ball well, and you can make defenses pay.
Yeah, and I feel like at times in the past, he gets too sped up in those positions where he catches the ball in the middle of the key, and he doesn't have a cutter, so he feels like he has to try and create something on his own. And that's where if you have design cuts and stuff like that, I feel like he's the type that'll wait for that to develop. He won't try to rush it. So he wants to pass in those situations. He obviously just hasn't had a lot of passing angles or cutters to pass to. So yeah, if he just takes the ball knowing there's going to be a cutter and waits a second, lets the defense fully come to him instead of bowling into them like he's done in the past, I think that should open up the offense. And I think even if our overall shooting isn't good outside of our main shooters, I think we could definitely still have one of the best offenses in the league just based off that movement.
Yeah, and here's also the thing about the roster this year is even if you have guys that just spot up, everybody can attack a closeout or a rotating defense. I have confidence in Nas being able to do that. I have confidence in Josh Hart being able to do that. And, one of those two guys will be the starting small forward. I have confidence in Jeremy Grant being able to do that. And then obviously Damon Ant being able to do that. In the past, it's always like we've had a Robert Covington. I'm not confident in Robert Covington doing that. Not at all. I'm not confident in Al-Farouq Aminu consistently doing that. I'm not confident in... teams just wouldn't run out on Evan Turner. We've had Mario Hezonja in the past. We've had all these guys where it's like they're not a three-point threat, and then some of them, I'm not confident in them just attacking closeouts or a defense rotating to them. This year, it makes it even harder to rotate out if you have one of those guys cutting, Nas or GP2, but then it's like instead of kicking it out to a Robert Covington or Al-Farouq Aminu, you're kicking it out to Jeremy Grant. If a defense rotates to run him off the three-point line, he can get into the paint and collapse the defense further, and maybe you're getting Dame or Ant open shots. When you have that many guys that can make plays like that, it makes it easier to get your guards, Dame and Ant, in a position where they can maybe get open catch-and-shoot threes or more open catch-and-shoot threes than they would in the past. And then teams are going to run those guys off the three-point line. If you have somebody closing out on Dame, how often do we see Dame just catch the ball and have a defender have to run him off the three-point line and he's able to just drive into the paint and make something happen? Steph Curry gets that all the time. Dame never gets that. Okay, we talk about Anthony Simons using his athleticism more, driving to the rim. If he's able to attack closeouts more and able to get into the paint without a defender on him because they had to run out at him and they had all that momentum going towards him and he blows by him, then you could start seeing Ant potentially dunk on people, right? It opens everything up. So that's what I'm looking for this year.
Yep. And I think another key part of that, too, is for the first time in a long time, the Blazers have probably 6 or 7 guys that could grab a rebound and take the ball up and initiate the offense. And we saw that a lot in the tanking portion of the season. Chauncey just constantly yelling at whoever got the rebound to just take it and go with it. And any little thing you can do like that creates an advantage on offense where it takes a second for a defender to locate their guy. And if you can use that to, or maybe someone else has to guard Dame or Ant or something, they're not always going to perfectly get back and match up on their correct guy every time. So the more advantages you can create just by pushing a little bit of tempo, you don't have to be like a super fast-paced team. It's just get the ball up the court a little quicker and make the defense fly around to try to catch up. If you combine that with the motion of the offense that we were talking about, the cuts, and then also trailer spot up 3-point shooters who are lights out shooters like Ant and Dame are. I mean, I don't know how you stop that offense if you run it correctly.
Yeah, if this offense is ran correctly, it's a top 5 offense in the league. You maybe don't have as much good shooting as you did last year, but you have more guys that can make a play. And, I mean, Gary Payton II was used wonderfully in Golden State's offense and played to his strengths as a cutter and an athlete very well. And if he can do that, then in Portland, then he'll be just fine. Everybody else, as you said, are guys that can make plays, grab rebounds, and push. I mean, Watford is the backup center. Yeah, he's undersized, but he can grab the ball and he can bring it up the court and he can pass. It's like you have a lot of guys that you can trust to make the right reads, make the right plays, and that should make things easier for the backcourt for Dame and Ant. So, there might be some things that aren't as good as they were in years past. Anthony Simons isn't as proven as a secondary scorer on a good team as CJ McCollum is, but he's a phenomenal shooter. And if you can get those guards playing off of other people at times, and then obviously they're going to create their own fair share of shots, it's a really hard offense to guard, and it's going to be a better offense during the playoffs because you can't just take one guy out of a playoff series and all of a sudden you're shutting down the offense. That was the problem in past. You take Dame out, you're screwed. Like, Blazers are screwed, right? Unless Rodney Hood steps up. That's the thing. Once we had a Rodney Hood type scorer, we're not winning that Denver series in 2019 in the second round if we don't have Rodney Hood scoring like he was in that series. Surprise, surprise. Somebody that can go get a bucket, go make a play was very helpful. And he, just look back to the fourth overtime game. It's just one game, but that game we could not win. Went into 4 overtimes for a reason. Mo Harkless played that entire overtime. Then he cramps up at the start of the fourth overtime. Rodney Hood gets subbed in. Yeah, he's fresh, but he can go get a bucket. Dame and CJ are gassed, and everybody knows that's where the ball's going. All of a sudden, Rodney Hood comes in. Jamal Murray gets switched off onto him because they don't want Jamal Murray on Dame or CJ, and all of a sudden, Rodney Hood has 8 points or whatever he did in that fourth overtime and won us that overtime. Hit it with a clutch 3. So, yeah, that's anecdotal, but the bigger picture is the more guys that you have that can create things and threaten a defense, the better. And that is where I think this Blazers team has a strength in. I think this is the most amount of players next to Dame that he's ever had that can facilitate a bit and can score off the dribble and can go make plays. Yes, some of them are better at one or the other, but you have players that can do things offensively. In the past, you've had a lot of dead weight in that regard. That's actually been in the rotation. Guys that either can't play off the ball like an Evan Turner, or guys that just were super questionable with the ball, or both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree.
So it comes down to the defense. That's why I have no worries about the offense, that entire conversation. So is there anything defensively you want to see?
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but I want to see them not hide players, especially Dame. I feel like he's gotten in a bad habit of just running to whoever's the corner 3-point shooter is on the opposite team. I'd like to see Dame and Ant be challenged to have to take on more responsibility. And that's because I feel like there's people who can shoulder the load now on offense, so they don't have to use as much energy to create shots or have to go ISO or try to break down a defense every single time like Dame's had to in the past. So I feel like he should be able to expend more energy on defense this year. And in doing so, I would just like them to all, because when you get an actual defensive assignment, when they're talking about it, like when they're going over the scouting report, and you get to Damian Lillard, and you're like, okay, Dame, this game you're going to be guarding Caldwell Pope, and he just stands in the corner on offense. He doesn't create off the dribble. So all you have to do is run back to the corner and guard him and make sure he doesn't get an open 3, right? And so Dame's like, oh, that's easy. All I have to do is run back to the corner, right? But if you're going over the scouting report and you're like, Dame, I want you to guard Jamal Murray this game, and I want you to shut his butt down, right? Then Dame, gets, to me, if you're a competitor, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then you're, focused, right? And I was like that in I mean, not to compare it to us playing again, but like, like I always liked when the coaches like believed in me to give me a tough defensive assignment or to have a certain role that was maybe beyond my skill set, but it always made me play harder and like, yes, I'm going to shut this guy down. Now, it didn't always happen, of course, but I just feel like it locks the players in. And I feel like the last few years in particular, the Blazers have just gotten in this nasty habit of just not really being locked in on the defensive end. They fall asleep off ball. And I feel like if you just put that responsibility on certain players, they step up. Case in point, Steph Curry, terrible defender prior to Steve Kerr coming there. He calls him from day one, said, I'm not going to let you get away with this. You have to step it up and be responsible on that end. Now, they still try to hide him sometimes, but that can't always be the game plan no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, in the Blazers, I think, have more defensive depth this year. If you're not getting the job done on defense or if you're lackadaisical, you have guys that I feel like you can sub into the game and feel comfortable with them playing more. Even if it's a guy all the way down to Jabari Walker, right? You can feel comfortable, like, you sub him and he's going to play hard, going to play some defense. Last year, it's like if Norman Rocco, which they were, are lackadaisical defensively, and it's like you got Dame and CJ, you need them in the game. How are you fixing that? You know what I mean? Like, how do you fix that defensively? Who are you going to bring in? Like, you bring in Nas, but even Nas was a mess off the ball. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I expect growth from Nas this year. But now it's like you have a Justice Winslow, who we saw look good in Portland. You have a Jabari Walker, who I think honestly can be a decent defender from day one. He's smart. I think that was the number one thing from Summer League that I felt like you could take something from, was just his IQ. Like, you can tell IQ more than anything else from Summer League.
100%.
So I'm confident in Jabari Walker. You know, if he gets spots minutes, he's going to play hard and he's going to play some D. You got Gary Payton II, obviously. Josh Hart's going to play some defense. I mean, even Jeremy Grant struggles getting through screens, but I don't expect him to be as asleep, especially off ball, as Robert Covington was last year. Because Robert Covington was a mess off the ball, man. I went back and watched some film recently, and dude, like, I cannot understate how many terrible off-ball possessions Robert Covington had where he was chasing steals or chasing blocks or completely out of position, like 20 to 25 feet off his guy, like comically bad. And defense was a mess last year. Now it's like you can hold players. I think you can hold them a little bit more accountable in terms of playing time because you have guys behind them that you can sub in if they're not getting the job done defensively. So, and then also the thing is with having more creators is you can play Dame or Ant a couple less minutes per game, and I think you can be fine in terms of a creation department, and therefore it's a situation where you can keep them a little bit fresher and give them, as you said at the start of this, more energy for the defensive end. So that is where I have hope. And then, do you want to see them run the same schemes that they did last year in terms of Nurkic being aggressive, hard hedging consistently? Like, what's your idea for that?
I'd like to see them hard hedge picks, but not stick to it as long. Nurk did a way better job than Cody Zeller did at the beginning of the season. And that's pretty much all we have to go on, since after Cody Zeller got hurt, it didn't really matter anymore. But you saw those stats, like we blitzed the pick and roll more than any other team. It was so misleading because we didn't actually blitz many pick and rolls. Hedges were always included in that, and that's when you basically show and recover. And I do think you need to do that, but I'm always a fan of mixing it up and not doing the same thing all year and doing different coverages against different teams and all that kind of stuff. So I would like to see it some, just not as much as we did last year and for as long as we did last year. And also not just like, okay, this game we're going to do this on every pick. Like, it's got to be mixed up. Like, sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. And I also want them to try and fight through all picks and not just switch automatically.
Yeah, stop switching. Yeah. No switching. No more Damian Lillard guarding Frank Kaminsky while he scores 30 on us or whatever the hell, man. Like, no more PJ Washington going 8 for 9 in Charlotte because CJ McCollum's guarding him on multiple possessions in the post and getting no help. Like, the switching, stop switching. You can switch if it's similar defenders or if it's Like if you got Dame on a point guard, you can switch Nasir Little onto that point guard if the guy Nasir Little guarding is somebody that won't just absolutely take advantage of Dame, right? Like there are certain situations you can switch. Stop switching in situations where you shouldn't. They did that way too much where they'd switch a guard onto a big or a big onto a guard and they'd get eaten alive. This is what you have more depth for. This is why you can play players a few less minutes per game than maybe you could have last year. You can keep them fresh so that they have the energy to consistently fight through screens and consistently give effort on that end. And if they don't, you got a guy behind them that can come in. Okay? So I agree with mixing up pick and roll coverages. I don't think the hedging was the problem last year. I think it was the stuff behind that. I think, Robert Covington was constantly opposition. Norman Powell was lackadaisical. And we're talking about those are our starting forwards. Yeah, not good. If you hard hedge or blitz pick and rolls, you have to have the three guys behind that on a string defensively and in the right spot to cover because you got a 3-on-4 situation. So you have to kind of play in gaps between players and then rotate depending on where the ball goes. The problem is, dude, like we were just constantly opposition and asleep off the ball and terrible off the ball. That's why it got picked apart a lot last year. It wasn't a problem with the scheme. It was a problem with the execution of the scheme. So this year, that is where, having more guys that can be more energetic, fly around more off the ball, having a Gary Payton II off the ball is huge in that regard. I want to see Nas take a jump there, that sort of thing, so that when we're aggressive on pick and rolls, we have guys that will play with a bunch of energy and play quick and not get beaten behind that, okay? And then you can run drop against, certain players. There's certain players who absolutely cannot run drop against, and that's what drove me crazy about Stotts always running drop. You can't run drop against Luka. You can't run drop against Donovan Mitchell. Most of the great guards in the league, you cannot run drop against, okay? Shoot. What's the number one scheme you'd want defenses to run on Damian Lillard on pick and rolls, Eric?
Drop.
Drop scheme. Please. Absolutely. Dame's having a 60-point game if that happens, man. So
that's why I want Stas to get another job so we can see it.
Oh, I know. What do you expect him to do? Dame is just amazing. It's like, well, Dame was amazing for him too. Where was that energy when he had Dame, right? But it's defense, switch up pick and roll schemes. Don't switch when you don't need to, and hold players accountable for effort because you got others behind them. And then, certain matchups you'll play different guys against. If it's a smaller bench, you'll play Watford against. I think that gives the Blazers the best chance to be a solid, maybe even good defensive team. So that is where I have hope on the defensive end, and that is why if they can figure that out and they can do that effectively, even though I'm probably have the Blazers 7th in the West, that is where they have a really high ceiling where I could see them absolutely being a team that gets home court advantage. A team that takes that defensive jump. Because that's what it comes down to, is just the defensive end of the ball. Can they play some freaking defense? I think they have the potential to.
Like Dallas last year.
I mean, if Dallas can be a top 5 defense last year, then Portland can be a top 5 defense, right?
Taylor Packer asked some good questions. Why did they stick to switching so much? It looks painfully obvious that it's not effective. So what's the thinking behind sticking with it? NBA coaches are no dummies, but WTH. Well, I think we'll agree that Monty Williams is a pretty good coach, right? Switching killed them in the Dallas series. They kept switching on Luka. They had Mikal Bridges on him, and he would get screened, and they'd switch, and he would just annihilate the switch. And it happened again and again. I think coaches think it's just too hard to fight through a pick an entire game, especially with someone who is your best defender. It just takes a toll on them. So I think they're trying to give them a little bit of a break, but man, yeah, it does not work switching on certain players. And Dallas killed us for years with switching because we'd switch the pick and roll, and then we end up with a guard on Dirk Nowitzki, and he would stand right at the free throw line and post that guy up, and he'd catch the ball, and he could either just shoot over the top or just back him down and do his little one-legged fadeaway. And it was just so infuriating that we never tried anything different to stop it. And so I mean, it's been happening for years. I think switching during the course of a regular season is just, it's so easy to get caught in that just being something you don't have to lock in as a team defensively. You could just say, oh, we're switching all screens. Now, some situations like a certain Furkan Korkmaz shot at the end of a game, like there are situations where you switch all picks, and there are certain teams, let's say the Toronto Raptors, when Van Vliet's not in the game, you can probably get away with switching all picks because they have a lot of players that are similar in what they like to do on offense. So it doesn't really hurt you if you switch off a Barnes to a Siakam or whatever. So I think there are reasons why switching works and can be effective, especially if you have guys who can guard multiple positions. But yeah, I just get so frustrated when that dang game against Phoenix last year, when we were still thinking we might have been good, and we kept switching on Chris Paul and having our big guy trying to guard him one-on-one in ISO situations, and he just killed us in the fourth quarter of a game. And it just, sitting here watching that, I don't understand how an NBA coach could do that, but that was still relatively young in Chauncey's first year as a head coach, and hopefully he learned from what not to do from this early season last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a mess when you have guys that play as lackadaisical as our starting forwards did last year, and just, I mean, I'm giving Chauncey a total pass for everything last year. Yeah. Everything. Like, I'm not holding any of that against him. I think this is his first real year having a chance to be a good coach, because I don't think certain guys on this team necessarily gave him the chance to be a good coach. I mean, the team started 10-1 at home when the players played with energy and were locked in defensively last year. And they beat some good teams. 10-1 at home. They went on the road and were a completely different team. I think that, like, if that team at home, or if that team on the road played with the same energy and attention to detail as they did at home, obviously they're not going to win as many games on the road, but you're talking about a team that's easily a playoff team without injuries. Easily a playoff team. Not a playing team, easily a playoff team. You're talking about a team that could make a run, because they were beating some of the best teams handily at the start of last season at home. Yeah, it's early in the season, but the way they were beating them, it was like their offense was phenomenal, just like it was in the past. But they had some phenomenal defensive games where their defense looked better than it had looked in years. And that was with Norman Powell as a starting 3 and Robert Covington as a starting 4. The problem is those guys on the road, dude, like, there's so many plays where Norman Powell just literally gave up on. I mean, I don't know how many times I watched him drive into a guy, flail, try and draw a foul, start complaining as this guy ran past him on D. Then Robert Covington's playing 25 feet off his guy. Those are the two guys that are supposed to help out Dame and CJ, because Dame and CJ are great defensively, obviously. Mm-hmm. When they were locked in, they could. When they were playing with effort, they could. And the thing is, CJ, during the first 10 games, was actually a solid defender at home. Like, he had a game where he played really good defense on Devin Booker. I did a whole film breakdown on it and highlighted a lot of CJ's plays. Just didn't last, man. So now it's like that's where I can't hold Chauncey accountable. Then he gets Justice Winslow. He's starting and he's barely played all year. You got Josh Hart and Ant and Nurkic, and all of a sudden they look like potentially a playing caliber team. Like, how is that even possible with new guys? You know what I mean? So I think Chauncey's going to be a good coach this year. I have full confidence in Chauncey this year.
I think for me is just, I don't think you can do like a set-based defense and just have that is what you run out every game, because like drop used to be a really common defense, and now if you run drop against certain teams, like they'll just annihilate it, man. And I just think you have to mix up coverages. Like, I like the zone that Chauncey did, but I felt like at times last year they were using it too much in games. And once again, who knows if that was just trying to see what worked and what didn't and giving it long stretches to see. But I don't think you need like gimmick defenses, but I think you need to mix up coverages and try different things. And so I hope they don't get stuck in that situation where something starts to work early in the season and they just continue to do it the rest of the season and don't try other things, because once it comes to the playoffs, as we know, you talked about earlier with that Golden State Warriors series, you can't just do something that you've done all year, and when it doesn't work, switch it up easily against another good playoff team. You have to practice that multiple times in the year. So I just hope they run different things. I don't mind trying a lot of different things, even if it costs you some possessions or maybe even some games earlier in the season, as long as you use that as growth for seeing what works later in the season. But yeah, I just hope they become less predictable than they've been in previous years.
Yep. Anyway, that's all I have to say in regards to scheme things. We've been streaming for almost 2 hours, man. That's phenomenal. We'll take one life advice question for Taylor Packer, since we've been doing this at the end of every Blazers Uprise live stream. Not 5 minutes, only one question, because we've already been live for 1 hour and 47 minutes. So maybe, one good life advice.
Maybe Bonnie has one since she's asking.
Yeah, Bonnie's asking. So Bonnie, you have a good question that you need life advice on? We are not therapists. I feel like we need to disclaim that, and we are basketball guys, but yeah, let's see what y'all got, since you guys want this. But then we're gonna wrap it up. This has been a fun stream. We'll be live again on. Bonnie says, "Nope, they're quite entertaining, though." I'm glad you're entertained by them, Bonnie.
Reese says, thoughts on Wemby's preseason? He's dominating. You know that. Like, what do you want us to say?
Actually, mid. Reese, he's been mid.
You would say that.
Yeah, he's been mid. Looks like a Dallas Maverick.
All right, guess no life advice questions.
Yeah, we didn't give him enough. Taylor, Taylor's gonna come through for me. I got nothing. Taylor.
Oh man,
this is disappointing. I've never been this disappointed on a live stream, except for when we signed Derrick Jones Jr. But honestly, this might be worse. Yeah, we'll have another player preview tomorrow. I dropped a podcast before this, so if you want more thoughts on a couple different things, answered a couple over-unders, then check that out. There's a video on this second channel, and then there's audio for that. And then main channel, player preview. Eric dropped a CBA-related video if you want to educate yourself. I like that. That should be your tagline, Eric. Educate yourself. Boston NBA lowering age limit to 18. It sounds like it's not going to happen, so I don't like it.
Are you sure it's not going to happen? Shams came out today saying that was
it's not something that they had made no progress towards it.
Yeah.
So maybe it might, but I'm not a fan of it regardless.
Yeah. I don't mind. I don't really care. I think I kind of like the way the rule is right now, but I also wouldn't mind having high school players back in. Just makes it so much more unpredictable.
Yep. I'm gonna answer this, but if you guys ask us basketball questions, try and make them like somewhat specific. Like, we always get like, what are your thoughts on this guy, or what are your thoughts on that guy? A lot of times, like, I don't even know where to start. Like, there's good and there's bad with every player. Like, so Miko Morris said, what are y'all thoughts on Jay Crowder in regards to him being traded, in regards to him being traded to Portland, in regards to him as a player? Like, I don't know. Like, you guys know, if you've watched before, I could sit here and talk about one specific player for probably like 30 minutes or 20, at least 20 minutes. Right? I'll read off all their stats, talk about their splits, talk about their fit. You know what I mean? Like, I could talk about a specific player for like 20 to 30 minutes. So, being specific is good in regards to questions. Thoughts on Jay Crowder coming to PDX? Eric, what are your thoughts on Jay Crowder coming to PDX?
Well, Jay Crowder makes around $10 million without looking it up. Who are we trading that's sort of $10 million? The only player we have on our roster that would even work in a trade, I believe, is
Winslow.
Hart. Winslow only makes $4 million.
Plus Nas.
Yeah, we're not trading Winslow and Nas for him.
Exactly.
And we're not trading Hart for him, I don't think. So, how are we getting him? Like, we have no way to get Crowder. So even if you wanted Crowder, thought he'd be a good addition, unless you think he's better than Hart or Nas and Winslow, I don't know. But that's what you have to think of when guys become available, and that's why he will not be traded to the Portland Trail Blazers, is because we don't really have a we don't really have a trade package.
Yeah. I think you could do Winslow plus Keon plus Greg Brown, but I don't think either team does that. Yeah, I don't think either team does that. But then also that puts us in the tax, and then we'd have to sign 2 more players, and we could still stay under the hard cap, but just barely. We'd be like right up against the hard cap, and we'd be in the tax, and Jody doesn't want to pay that. So I don't think Crowder's an option at all.
Crowder is not getting waived. That's not happening.
Yeah. Also, I don't know, man. Like, do we need Jake Crowder?
See, I think he fits on pretty much any team, but I don't think we necessarily need him as to the point where we need to actually trade assets for him.
Yeah, we wouldn't start him.
Yeah. He's not going to start over Grant, so...
I wouldn't start him with Grant.
But I will say, I think if the Suns give up a pick along with Crowder and Saric for someone like Bogdanovic, I think that's going to be a mistake and might make me lean towards saying that their under's going to hit.
I don't think that would make them worse, but I don't think it would make them better.
Yeah, but I mean, if they give up a pick on top of that, I saw some 3-way trade where that was basically it with adding picks to it. But yeah, I just think they're going. I mean, Crowder's kind of a weird player, but the guy wins. I mean, it's kind of like Pat Beverly, he pretty much makes the playoffs on every team he's on. The guy just knows how to play basketball and make teams better, and you need glue guys like that. And I think that would be a huge loss to a team, and I think that's why I say he'll never get cut, is because those kind of guys have value in trades, whether it's this before the season starts or before the trade deadline. I think the Suns definitely keep him and trade him at some point during the season if they don't get anything good for him right now.
Yep, I agree. Anyway, we're not going to make it a full 2 hours. Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you everyone for watching. Appreciate you all, and we'll see you on Thursday night.
Yep, check out everything that I dropped and Eric's dropped recently. Top one, there's a bunch of stuff. We still got content for you guys despite it being September, so definitely check all that out. We greatly appreciate it. Always love trying to bring you guys things that you enjoy, even in the dog days of August and September. But it's about to be October, 1 week till Media Day. We'll have you covered with Media Day reaction Monday night. Me and Steven for the Believe in Blazers podcast, we plan on putting something out maybe Saturday where we look at like what we would ask certain players or what we would want to hear, and we can talk about that a little bit on Thursday's stream this week if you want to as well, Eric. But we'll have the recap for sure on Monday night, the day of Media Day, live at 9:30 this time next week. And I can't wait to talk about some quotes, man, and things that are actually like, we get to talk about things that are happening. I'm ready for things to happen.
Yep. And real quick, Miko, if the Jazz trade for him for Crowder, and do you think Danny Ainge would then have him as value in another trade to where they get more assets, or do you think they just waive him and be done with him? Because I don't see any scenario where Danny Ainge doesn't try and get more for him. That's what you do as a GM. You make a trade and then you trade him again and get more pieces. So that's what they do. They wouldn't cut him.
Yeah. And I don't see us being the team that would sign him. He'd go and sign with like Miami or something.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't sign. He wants to go back to Miami supposedly, so he wouldn't sign with Portland anyway. So I think there's probably zero chance that Jay Crowder ends up in a Portland uniform to start next season. I think there's like zero chance we make a move in general. So that's kind of where I am. But not a good question for sure, because there's Jay Crowder trade rumors, but that's just how we view it. Anyway, that wraps things up for this episode of Blazers Uprise Live. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Just stay tuned for what we got going into the season. Season tips off a month from today, October 19th, against the Sacramento Kings, and we'll have a post-game show, everything we've always done, and maybe we'll try and add to things a little bit more and continue to try and build upon what we've started here. Anyway, that's a wrap for this stream. We will catch you Thursday with another live stream right here on Blazers Uprise Live. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.